Guten Tag, liebe Zuschauer. Herzlich willkommen bei unserem Film.
Hello, viewers, and welcome to our film, A Year with Marklin. This year again, we've been travelling a lot on your behalf, including a visit to Canada, the country with the glorious scenery, mountains, rivers and lakes, but also with plenty of railways and railway enthusiasts. It's a long flight, with the sun travelling the same way. Our aircraft left Frankfurt at midday, and after flying for 10 hours, we landed in Vancouver, where it was late afternoon. It wins you over right from the start. In the foreground, the Pacific, in the background, the mountains, and in between, the skyline of a city with nearly 600,000 inhabitants. A relatively young city too, founded only in 1886. The most popular place to spend a day in the open air is Stanley Park, with its 200 kilometers of paths, a great many vantage points, and the totem poles that remind us of the country's first inhabitants, the Red Indians. There's a remarkable timepiece in Vancouver, the steam clock in Gastown. Every quarter of an hour it blows its top, so to speak, for all to hear. It's only a few miles from the steam clock to where a genuinely enthusiastic Marklin fan lives. Walter Menzel has devoted his entire life to model railways, both privately and professionally. His model railway store has an excellent selection, and visitors and customers alike are bound to hear all about his favourite company.
My grandfather had Marklin trains, my father, of course. And so I think I've been brainwashed with Marklin. I also believe that with my father and godfather having Canada's largest hobby store at one time, and seeing all the different product lines, I was able to see the quality of Marklin. And in my personal opinion, Marklin has always been number one.
The HO layout in the basement where he lives promises to be unique. The backdrop to this perfect world in miniature came from the Nuremberg artist Peter Bomhardt, who explained the concept to us.
Großstadtbahnhof mit einem kleineren, älteren Bahnhof möglicherweise.
This is a big city station with a smaller, older station too, possibly with an extensive locomotive depot. Then the city area and the city streets, and a small suburban station at a higher level, with other city districts such as this industrial estate here. Menzel's son Taylor agrees. It all fits together perfectly.
Have a nice big layout one day, build one with my father, with a nice background like this. It's great. I'd like to have my modern trains like the ICE and all that, the big boys. I like those kind of trains.
We shan't encounter any big boys on this journey, but we shall see any number of freight trains in a breathtaking landscape. The Fraser River Valley is one of the most important traffic arteries in Western Canada. It was opened up only in the second half of the 19th century by the men who surveyed and built these dramatic rail routes. In 2007, there were still plenty of trains to see, immensely long by European standards, often with 100 freight cars. Railway fans always include an imposing bridge if they can. The Cisco Bridge near Lytton is almost a century old. The entrance to the underworld is not far off either. Hell's Gate, a narrow gorge only 34 meters wide, which evidently struck terror into Simon Fraser's heart when he discovered it 200 years ago. Around Vancouver, the countryside is heavenly rather than infernal. Dave Bithell lives in a particularly attractive spot that can only be reached by boat. He too has the Marklin virus in his veins and has converted a whole garage to accommodate his hobby. His latest acquisition, the SBB AE 814. Dave Bithell was stationed in Germany during his military service and became fascinated by model railways, including authentic steam locomotives. All the jewels in his collection get a regular run on his big layout. But what got him started on Marklin?
With a little bit of money we had in the army, I slowly started buying Marklin because I was told they're the best. And I never doubted it for 1 minute. I think the crocodile, the Swiss, is my favorite, but they're all good. There's no such thing as a Marklin engine that isn't, in my opinion, the best.
The model railway obviously gives him a lot of pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine what better. You can come out here in an evening, shut yourself in here, and almost transport yourself into a world of make-believe.
It's impressive to visit a layout on the Pacific coast and see the 1954 World Cup train running happily there. Purists might complain that the green trees and bushes, the rocks and miniature figures are missing. But even so, the layout has a simple charm, and everything runs smoothly thanks to digital control. With these scenes, we take leave of Canada and travel to quite a different world. Our next stop is the Allgäu region of Germany. The diesel locomotives are busy here too, although the freight trains they pull are not so long. But they have a familiar look, thanks to Ludmilla, an engine that almost qualifies for cult status. Günsach is a small village where the world is still in good shape, as the saying goes, at least when you visit Ludwig Moser, who is a traffic superintendent for German Rail. The full-scale railway has not yet completed its modernization plans everywhere. In Günsach too, the technical equipment is from an earlier period, but still does the job reliably. The red V160 tells us, model railway fan at work. Just as in real life, Ludwig Moser sets the points and signals on his layout by hand and makes sure that the trains run reliably. How did he become a railwayman? My first job was driving a bus, but then I saw the light and went to work for German Rail. I now have my dream job, you might say. I've made my hobby into a career. The Allgäu is such an attractive region, and the scenery on the layout reflects this too. It's completed by a painted backdrop with local scenes. In contrast to our Canadian insider, building landscapes is one of Ludwig Moser's many talents. For some years now, he has added innumerable details, but always with a clear concept in mind.
Mir kommt also kein ICE, keine Oberleitung drauf. Ich lege da Wert, dass ich
I won't be running the ICE through here. There isn't any overhead wire. On my layout, I like to run the trains I used to watch when I was a child. That includes one of the legendary TEE RAMs that Swiss railways used to run between Munich and Zurich. Ludwig Moser well remembers the day when the TEE Dream train turned into a nightmare. On the 9th of February 1971, it was derailed in Eitrang, not far from Günsach, and overturned, killing 28 people and severely injuring another 42. The cause of the accident was never entirely established. Ludwig Moser has not forgotten the victims of this tragedy. He lets the bells ring in their memory. In the model railway world, such disasters fortunately can't happen. The idyllic Braunschwein atmosphere is seldom disturbed by any unforeseen events. Idyllic is a word that's justified in view of the loving care that enthusiasts devote to their layouts. The steam locomotive disappeared from the Allgäu region quite early. As so often, only the model railway keeps its memory alive and recalls the days of one's childhood.
Da ich aus der Landwirtschaft stamme, habe ich auf so
I come from a farming family, and so the tractor is the kind of vehicle I first learned to drive. Today, Ludwig Moser prefers to drive the Marklin rail bus. He well remembers the full-scale original, and rode in it on many occasions. Having visited his miniature world, we can only congratulate him on being the fortunate owner of such a splendid layout.
Das nächste Thema, liebe Zuschauer, ist mitreißend und berauschend zugleich.
Our next topic is dramatic and tempting at one and the same time. The new Marklin models that appeared in 2007. 3 colours have a special role to play: green, red and black. The E50, the 218 and, last but not least, the Series 05. Let's look back at what the colours meant to us at a time when people still travelled by train, the buses had long bonnets, the suitcases didn't have wheels, and the splendid Series 05 steam locomotives were still at work. Here is 05003 in all its glory, the 2007 Insider model. Driving wheels 2 meters 30 in diameter and the unusual 464 axle layout were features of this design. Sadly, 05003 reached the end of its active life in 1958 and was cut up 2 years later, but the legend lives on. The model is largely made of metal with many splendid details. Thanks to the MFX digital decoder, a whole range of sound effects can be produced. It's powered by a soft-drive sine wave-controlled high-performance motor. It runs beautifully, as we can see. Our next call is on the Haferler family, Hubert, Hildegard and young Henri, who are just starting their caravan holiday. The Haferlers and other campers have left the stress of the everyday world behind them and found an idyllic spot next to the railway. This is where the world of Germany's legendary economic miracle comes to life again, and people were inspired by the dream of a united Europe. The Rheinpfeil Trans-European Express had a dome car and a restaurant car with a raised roof. Trans-European Express was the name given to the elegant VT 11.5, a name that suggested far-off places. To Paris, for instance, the city for lovers, with attractive railway staff and any amount of luxury. We had a lot of regular customers. They were always glad to travel with us and often shook hands when they arrived. We even watched their children grow up as the years went by. The most difficult part of the job was cooking meals for so many people in such a confined space. It all needed to be carefully organized. Fresh food was the trademark, cooked with care and served in an attractive setting. The VT 11.5 was the star of the German rail network, but our national neighbours were determined not to be left behind. The French developed the CC 4100, a locomotive that could run on 4 different electrical systems and therefore cross the border into Belgium or Germany. It was mainly used on international express trains like the TEE, and often seen in capital cities such as Paris and Brussels. Model railway enthusiasts have complete sets of stainless steel carriages at their disposal, for instance if they want to run the Étoile du Nord TEE on their layouts. Between 1964 and 1970, Alstom built 10 of these engines, with their striking front-end design. With a top speed of 180 km an hour and a 4,450 kilowatt power output, they were worthy rivals for the German 103. At that time it was unusual for electric engines to have a single motor on each bogie, but the model performs extremely well with just the one motor. Another bold front-end design. This is the Gotardo TEE, another international train that could run on 4 different power supply systems.
Mein Kontrollorgan.
My control system. Now the master switch is on. We have an AC power supply system for France and another for Germany and Austria. But the train can run under the wire in Italy, the Netherlands, and on the French DC system too. In Melide station, on the Gotthard line, the TEE meets the German 185, which has been operating here for some time, just like the Gotardo itself, though this is only used now for extra trains. But it's always a welcome guest. There's a lot to be said for this train, with its extra charm and its air of comfort, compared with the fine new trains that somehow create a rather sterile atmosphere. How true that is. But the Gotardo's days are numbered, simply because its maintenance is too expensive. Fortunately for us, it will live on as a splendid HO model. This model was produced as a once-only batch in 2007 to celebrate the TEE Jubilee. It's a 5-car set, largely made of metal, and shows the train as it was delivered in 1961. Warm white diodes, the MFX digital decoder, and a soft drive sine wave motor are all part of the outstanding technical specification. Who would have risked a bet that such a splendidly restored dome car would be seen again on the German rail network in 2007? Surely no one. But here it is, visible from a long way off. The Rheingold TEE, more beautiful than ever. This inspired us to polish up the Marklin models in our film, with striking colours and figures in the new carriages, which are built to the more generous length scale of 1 to 93.5. The driver is already in the cab of our engine, a Series 112. Before the elegant 103 began to pull the luxury TEE trains, the task was performed for nearly 10 years by the equally good-looking Series 112. A tough job, as a glance at this engine seems to confirm. But a magnificent train nonetheless. Let's take another look at the original. The carriages were in a condition that's best described as natural. They'd been well used and in some cases converted, with tables and woodwork typical of the region. All that was eliminated in the course of a lengthy restoration process. Fortunately, German Rail was keenly interested in the project and had 2 locomotives restored. Now it's a genuine pleasure to travel along the Rhine in this train. We've just taken over another standard locomotive that was being restored in Dessau. We now have 2 engines capable of pulling this train at speeds up to 200 kilometers an hour. It's as if someone turned the clock back and brought the luxury train era back to life. First-class travel on the classic routes. The Rheingold and Rheinpfeil were the finest trains that German Rail had to offer. And they're still to be seen on model railway layouts, as a memento of the 1960s. Night has fallen at the campsite, but the summer evening atmosphere is not complete until the Rheinpfeil has swept past. Its romantic interior lighting is also a feature of the model carriages, which have electrical contacts in the couplings. Only the best will do. Freight trains have to do without most of this luxury. Their task is to move heavy loads over long distances. The E50 was an ideal source of motive power for this task. Now, at last, after the actual locomotives have been withdrawn, it's available as a Marklin model. Not a very spectacular design, perhaps, but it still arouses an emotive response. That was my favourite engine, the E50, with its 21-ton static axle load at the head of a freight train. A beautiful sight, and a sensible way of keeping the freight trains moving. The E50 first appeared on the scene in 1957. It was the first heavy electric locomotive for freight trains, and took over from the pre-war E94 and the last of the big steam engines. To mention the E50 is to think automatically of coal and iron ore for heavy industry, supplied by a steady stream of long freight trains. Over a 16-year period, 194 E50s were built. German Rail scrapped almost all of them in 2003 and 2004. In their heyday, they were to be seen in all the rail system's different colour schemes. And that's how we will remember them, the green or red giants that kept the freight trains moving so effectively. These 6-axled engines may have vanished from the scene, but they will still be performing on model railway layouts for many years to come. The Series 150 is dead. Long live the E50 as a Marklin model. The E50 was the largest design in German Rail's new construction program, precisely 19.4 meters long and with a power output of 4,410 kilowatts. Marklin's model is made of metal. It's 22.4 centimeters long, with many impressive details. Rules are there to be obeyed, and therefore the E50 is using the front pantograph because of the tank wagon coupled behind it. Incidentally, this gas tank wagon is the 2007 HO model for insiders, a most successful new design. We've aged it a bit here like the complete goods train of the late 1960s, a most satisfying sight. Doesn't the 218 sound splendid with its diesel engine sound effects? The Series 218 is a maid of all work, however varied. Almost 400 were in service at one time, painted in every colour scheme German Rail decided to adopt. This new generation diesel engine first appeared in 1968, and for several decades was German Rail's most important mainline diesel. Ironically, just 218 of these Series 218 locomotives are still in service. But any time now, the total is likely to drop still further. It's good to know that increasing numbers of 218s are likely to be seen in the future, on Marklin model railway layouts. The engine brakes smoothly but firmly. While waiting to cross another train, the driver has time to inspect the engine room of his 218, where a 12-cylinder diesel generates the necessary traction power. Marklin's new model is made of metal, with fine detailing. We've added a few items in our workshop and given the model an older appearance. A feeling of nostalgia is unavoidable when you see them double-heading a long freight train. The rated power output was 2,500 horsepower at first, and 300 horsepower more on later engines. You could attach any kind of freight train to the 218's coupling and it would be brought effortlessly and reliably to its destination, even military equipment from Marklin's 4M4 program. Or, in marked contrast, sugar beet, a cargo often handled in the past. Warm white diodes, perfect sound and splendidly smooth running are features of this highly authentic model. The secret's in the MFX decoder and the soft drive high-performance motor. With all 4 axles shaft-driven, the model's tractive power is most impressive. The same can be said for every other aspect of this splendid model. Good, better, Marklin. This applies to the engineer's tower car as well. These busy yellow-painted vehicles venture out onto the track whenever the overhead wires have to be checked or need attention. It's no exaggeration to say that Marklin's model is a perfect reproduction. The engine can be heard rumbling away happily thanks to the sound decoder, as the tower car sets off for its next task. On the actual vehicle, the mechanics reach the roof with a ladder and through a skylight.
Geht nur, indem das Fahrzeug geerdet ist.
Go ahead. The vehicle is earthed, so that power from the overhead wire can't cause a flashover. There are no such problems with the model. Thanks to the MFX decoder, it's automatically identified by the control system. But to demonstrate everything it's capable of, it needs 71 as a second address. Then, with F2 for instance, the tower can be rotated. Work on the overhead wires has to be completed quickly to avoid severe disruptions to the regular timetable. The men go about their tasks quickly and efficiently. The model, with the same yellow paint finish, is much easier to handle. You can call up a full range of sound effects. And with figures from Fraser, the scene on the model railway can be almost the same as you would see on German rail in real life. The grills inside the windows are an authentic touch. The inscriptions are accurate and of high quality, and there are many other details to delight the eye, all closely modelled on the full-scale original. Warm white LEDs are used for pleasant lighting. The test pantograph is the DBS54 pattern, and even the alignment scale to check the overhead wire's position in relation to the track hasn't been forgotten. It's driven with an accelerator pedal, as if it were a truck. Built between 1955 and 1974, these vehicles are not seen very often now on the DB rail network. Some of them were bought by private companies that perform the work under contract to German Rail. The fortunate owner of a central station can enjoy the full performance of this new model. With 14 different functions and 3 piezo motors, the tower car sets entirely new standards.
In dem nun folgenden Beitrag präsentieren wir Ihnen.
Our next item introduces you to an interesting destination for the railway enthusiast, though the rods you will see there are much smaller. A Black Forest farm such as you might see in a tourist leaflet. This one really exists, with a railway line running more or less through its back garden. It's on one of Germany's most attractive mountain routes, the Schwarzwaldbahn, or Black Forest Railway. This starts in Offenburg, a town in the Rhine Valley, and terminates in Singen, not far from Konstanz, with the Upper Rhine Railway. It takes the Interregio Express from Offenburg only 18 minutes to reach Hausach, 33 kilometers away. Two minutes later, we find ourselves at Hausach station a second time round. But, as if by magic, it has now shrunk to 1:87 scale. The Black Forest Railway in miniature, created with such artistic skill that the visitor can hardly tell the difference between the model and the real thing. Yet this really is the Black Forest Model Railway in Hausach. The emphasis here is on nature. Even the storks are bringing up a family, and the farm worker enjoys a short break after a hard day's work. Driven by a fast-flowing stream, the watermill rattles away and contributes to the convincing authenticity of this idyllic scene. Europe's largest model railway based on an authentic original, says Thomas Panzer, who built the layout and operates it. The neutral observer is inclined to accept his claim. Visitors are fascinated. Large model railway layouts have become popular in recent years, and this one in Hausach is surely in the top league. The man who built it has seen plenty of forest in his time, but freely admits that he sometimes couldn't see the wood for the trees.
Ich komme also von Offenburg, fahre täglich mit dem Zug hierher.
I live in Offenburg and travel here by train every day. When I was planting trees on the layout for 8 or 9 hours, I could hardly bring myself to look out of the window, although the forests here are so beautiful. You can imagine how relieved I am that most of the trees are now safely in position. A Black Forest farm, the way they have existed for many centuries. Several examples have now been moved to open-air museums. Let's have a refreshing bathe in the lake, relax for a while and restore our energies at the nearby inn before we continue the journey. After all, the Black Forest route is almost 150 kilometers long. There's an hourly train service in each direction through countryside that makes you want to jump out and start your holiday there and then. Hornberg Castle has dominated the valley for almost 1,000 years. Götz von Berlichingen, the knight renowned for vulgar verbal attacks on his adversaries, once lived here. There's some very attractive architecture here. For instance, the largest structure along the route, the Reichenbach Viaduct in Hornberg.
Dieser Betonpfeiler kam dadurch zustande, dass Ende des Zweiten Weltkrieges die Strecke hier.
This concrete pier has a history. At the end of the Second World War, the railway line was bombarded from the air in an attempt to stop supplies from getting through. The bombers failed to destroy the entire bridge, and so the damaged sections were simply replaced by a concrete structure, which is what we can see on the model today. Woodworking has a long tradition in the Black Forest. For centuries, the wood was used for shipbuilding, with the log rafts travelling as far as the North Sea. Even today, timber from the Black Forest is in strong demand for building work. The Black Forest Railway was a masterly piece of surveying, carried out by Robert Gerwig. It opened in 1873 and is the only double-track mountain route in Germany. The Black Forest Model Railway in Hausach occupies an area of 400 square meters and has 1,300 meters of track. Trucks also travel automatically along its roads. There are infrared diodes at many points on the layout. They communicate with the train control computer and transmit the necessary signals to the trains. In this miniature black forest, up to 50 trains can be on the move at any one time. There are rather more trees, 62,000 altogether.